Awesome. So, welcome everyone to another episode of iLearn Saturdays with Cassange Bitère. And Cassange will be leading you guys on the logic model. Cassange, the stage is yours.
So again, good morning, everyone. As David said, my name is Cassange Bitère. I will be the one leading this training about logic model today. So just as a proper introduction, my name is Cassange Bitère. I am a development practitioner who recently graduated with a master's degree in development practice at Emory University. And in terms of work experience, I have been working in the development field for like 5+ years now. And the different type of projects I worked on are related to global health and well-being, especially working as a monitoring and evaluation officer for an AIDS program, HIV/AIDS project in Haiti with the AIDS Healthcare Foundation in Haiti. And different other fields I worked on are women economic empowerment, early child marriage, social norms, and so on. And through my professional career, also my academic career, I've gained like some important skills in monitoring and evaluation, data analysis, both quantitative and qualitative data analysis. And also I do some research design and implementation. And also talking about research, since last year, I've been doing some research studies related to social norms and well-being as well, well-being measurement, to be proper. And one of these studies, the social norms studies in Kenya, is submitted to an academic journal recently, and it's in review currently right now. And the two other ones are being developed for submission pretty soon. So yeah, basically that's who I am. And today for this training, I have an agenda which is pretty short. So as you can see here, the first thing we're going to dive in is the objective of the training. And also to kick it off, we're going to define what the logic model is, its importance, including other terms that they use to refer to a logic model within different organizations. We will also go over the key components of the logic model, the two different approaches you can actually use to develop or create a logic model. And one interesting thing I wanted to include in this training today is the difference between outputs and outcomes. You're going to see that in the logic model as well, because most of the times people working in the field sometimes cannot make the difference, or they are really confused about the outputs and the outcomes. And then we will review the steps to structure and refine a logic model. And for the second part of the training, I will send out like a case study and a template for a logic model so you guys can work on a logic model yourself. You can email me back that logic model so I can give you feedback as well. Yep, that's basically it. I had a Q&A session at the end of the training as well. But after reviewing this video, if you have questions, you can email me whatever question you have, and I will do my best to provide as much information as I can. Yeah, so let's dive into the objective of this training. So what I expect you will be able to, after this training, is that you will be able to understand the different components of a logic model. You'll be able to develop a logic model for specific program or project, or also to use a logic model for program planning, implementation, and evaluation as well. So as a definition for logic model, a logic model is a visual representation that captures the relationships between the key elements of a project or program, outlining how resources, activities, outputs, and outcomes are connected. It helps to clearly define a program and its expected outcomes, and serves as a roadmap to guide planning, implementation, and evaluation as well. So basically what I mean by this is like the logic model is like a game plan. It's like saying, hey, if we have these resources, which are the inputs, here's what we can do with them, which are the different activities that we're going to tackle the issues that we're trying to address. And if we do these activities, we are going to end up having these type of producers or services, which are the outputs. And if we do have these outputs, we're going to have these changes that we are aiming for, which are the outcomes actually. So basically, the logic model is just a way to keep things clear and make sure that we are not just doing things just to do them, but we are doing them to actually address a real issue and bring change in the community or in the target population as well. So now, why do you think it is important to use a logic model in project planning implementation? So it's important because it helps to bring clarity and better communication among the team, to keep focus and to guide you as well, and for more flexibility. And by clarity and communication, having clarity and communication really help to understand the goal of, and also how we plan to reach the outcomes or the end goal of the project, and make sure that everyone is on the same page. So it also helps us to, well, like having clarity and better communication also helps to have focus and also to provide a structure showing how all different parts of the project connect together. And also this will help guide the different activities of the project to track the progress, and also like conduct all the monitoring and evaluation and make sure that everything that we are doing are measurable and stuff. And for the flexibility part, as the program evolves or as the program is going on, we may need to adjust based on certain things that may happen during the cycle of the project. So we may need to adapt to them. So flexibility gives us the option to change certain activities in our program or project as well, and also helps us to better track the project. And for the other terms that we use in logic model, as you can see here, we have different ones, which are the roadmap, theory of change, program plan or program theory. We do have program framework as well, but the most common one used is theory of change, but it doesn't matter really because different organizations, they use the name that they want to refer to for the logic model or for their theory of change. It's not like for a specific organization, there's a specific name that you use. So now we're going to discuss like the key components of the logic model. As you can see, it's on the list here. The key components are problem statement, inputs, or again, resources. And we do have activities, we have outputs, we have outcomes, and also we have assumptions and context. Or context, mostly they refer to it as external factors. And we're going to dive into them right now. First, let's start with the problem statement. This is where you're going to clearly lay out the specific problem or issue that the project is trying to solve. It's like saying, here's what we need to fix actually. Here's the problem that we need to address. And for the inputs, there are all the resources that maybe you have, or maybe you need, or maybe you have, but you need more than that to make the things happen. Stuff like money, people, equipment, and time. These are all the type of resources that are inputs that you may need to make things happen in your project. Basically, it's like everything that is going to make the project work, actually. And then based on those resources, you're going to be able to organize certain activities or actions. These are the things that you're going to use to tackle the problem that is going on in the community or in the population, your targeted population actually. These include things like organizing workshop, maybe having meetings and having training sessions or providing certain type of services. It depends on the organization or the issue that is going on. For example, let's say it's a health issue, maybe you're going to provide healthcare. So these are the type of services that you're going to provide as well as part of your activities. So basically, if I'm trying to explain better, when you wake up on a Saturday, maybe you have a lot of things to do and you have to do all those things in order to achieve your goal for the day. You wake up, you take a sticker note or like a whatever sheet you have, you write everything that you need to do. Like, I need to go to the supermarket, I need to do this, I need to do that. So basically, it's like a to-do list of the project. And based on this to-do list, there are products that you're going to get out of all these to-do lists or out of all these activities. So the way you need to think about those outputs is like the direct results of those activities. Like, for example, in with these organizations, the outputs may be reports that you're going to create. They may be like trainings completed or number of people you trained or number of trainings that occurred within the cycle of the project or how many people that you've provided healthcare to during the cycle of that project. These are the direct results of the activities. And then based on these outcomes, you will have certain, based on the outputs, you will have certain outcomes. And outcomes are considered as the ultimate changes we want to see as a result of all the work that we have been doing. But I just put outcomes here, but most of the time in the logic model, you have to define the different types of outcomes. So to break it down, we have three different stages of outcomes. It may be the short-term outcomes, which are the immediate changes or benefits of the output. And also we have intermediate outcomes, which are the changes that happen over a bit of time, like maybe a year after the program started or 2 years after the program started. And we have the long-term outcome. They refer to it as the end goal of the project as well, or long-term impact. And this is exactly what we are really aiming for. So sometimes the long-term outcomes are like, yeah, the very ultimate goal, like maybe a shift in behavior, improve knowledge, something like that as well. And also, we do have the assumptions. And as you can see here, assumptions are conditions of factors that we believe to be necessary for the change to occur. So these are all the things that we believe that have to be true for our plan to work or for our project to work. These are like the conditions that we rely on, and that if they are all present, like let's say that you need the community engagement in order for your project to work. So if you do have that community engagement, your project is going to work. These are all the type of assumptions that you can have. And lastly, we have the external factors, which are all the outside influences that could affect the project. It can affect the project in two different ways. It may affect the project and make it work better. It may affect the project and impact the success as well negatively. So these are things like the economic situation of the community, political instability in the community as well. So these are all considered as different type of external factors. They are not really specific, but it depends on the community you're working in. It might be something related to natural disasters as well. So these are all the different type of things you really cannot control, actually. And when it comes to actually start working on developing your logic model, there are two different approaches you can use. And the first approach is the forward logic using the if then statement. So first, basically what a forward logic is like you're saying, if I have this money, I can do this, then I can do this activity. If I do this activity, then I will have this result. If I have this result, then I will change this. This is basically how the forward logic works. But for the second approach, which is the reverse logic, we don't start from like using the inputs, but we start with the end goal in mind, like the long-term impact. So we identify the program desired impact, long-term impact, and then we figure out the steps that we need to get to the end goal impact. It's like you're working backward. Like the first one is like you're working forward, like from right to left, from left to right. And for the reverse logic, you're working from right to left. And further, for the first one, for the forward logic, here is exactly what I mean by it. So you using the if-then logic, it's like bringing a chain of reaction. It's like if we have the resources or input, then we can carry out the activities that we want. If we conduct these activities, then we'll produce some outputs. And if we have those outputs, then we can change the outcome that we are aiming for. It's all about making sure that each step leads to the next and everything flows toward the end goal of the project as well. So in order to create using the forward logic in order to create a logic model, first, you need to start with the problem statement. This is where you clearly define what issue or need that your program needs to address or needs to solve, and make sure that the problem statement is really specific, measurable, and relevant to the community or to the population, to the targeted population. And then based on this problem statement, you will define the goal of your project or your program. This should directly be connected to solving the problem that you have identified in the problem statement. And after that, you have identified or defined the goal of the project, you need to identify the resources or the inputs. This means listing out every resources that you already have and what you will need to complete all the resources or inputs. It's like funding, people, maybe sometimes equipment as well, and any type of partnership or organizations that you may need to approach in order for you to be able to achieve or to realize or to organize all the activities that you need to organize. Then you need to define all the activities. And as I said earlier, these activities are actions that your program will need to tackle all the problem, all the things that you actually need to do. Make sure that these activities are directly linked to addressing also the problem statement. It's not like you have the money and you're going to do an activity that doesn't really address the problem statement that you have identified. And then the next step is to determine all the outputs, which are the immediate products or services that will be produced based on these activities. They also need to be measurable and clearly connected to what you're doing. You're not going to have an output that doesn't really address or impact the problem statement that you have identified there. And then based on all these outputs, you will need to establish the outcomes. And as I said, you have to break them down into the three different outcomes: the short-term outcomes, and the intermediate outcome, and the long-term outcomes. And remember that outcomes are really the change or impact that your program aims to achieve in this community. It can be like improved knowledge, it can be shifting in behaviors, or whatever the program is trying to address. So these are considered as the outcomes. And there are different questions. I have a list of questions here that you may need to ask to identify or to define all these steps. They are not like an exhaustive list of questions, but there are possible questions that you may need to ask to like help you identify all those steps actually. So for the problem statement, the question that you may be asked is like, what is the main issue or needs of the community or of the people? Why is it important to address this issue or problem? Who is affected by this issue, and what are the consequences if this issue is not addressed? And for the inputs or resources, we can ask question, what resources do we have right now? And what resources do we need to make this happen or to actually undertake certain activities? And who else, like partners or organizations can really approach to help us out with our resources as well. And then for the different activities, questions you may ask also are like, what specific actions do we need to carry out to reach our goal? And how will these activities help solve the problem? Or how will these activities will impact the issue that we are trying to address? And for the outputs, questions you may ask are, what are we expecting to produce from these activities? And who is going to be involved and benefit from all of them? And for the outcomes, we can ask questions, what changes are we aiming, or what changes are we aiming, or what a behavior are we trying to shift in this community as well? And we always remember as well, the questions that you're trying to ask yourself, they should also be broken down into the short term, for the short term outcome, for the intermediate outcome, and for the long term outcome. Like maybe questions that may address the short term outcomes are questions like, how will these activities or these outputs um, help us maybe shift this behavior? So that you from that output, you can directly get something, get a result that can be considered as your short-term result. And you can ask those questions for the different type of outcomes as well. Move to the next, and then we have the reverse logic. Even though you're using the reverse logic, one thing that you need to understand is that you still need to start by clearly defining your problem statement. This means that we have to identify the exact issue that we are trying to solve and what's the real problem or challenge that our program or the project is trying to address. And once you are clear on the problem statement, then you jump to the very end or goal of the project and work your way backward. Like we ask, what's the big impact or end goal we want to achieve at the very end of this project? Or maybe you can ask question, what long-term changes are we aiming for? Then you continue to go backward and say what specific outcomes or changes that we need to happen to reach that impact. And we can maybe ask a question like, what out for the output section of output part, what outputs or products or services or deliverables maybe that we need to produce these activities or these outcomes, not these activities, but these outcomes. And we can continue to break it down further and think about the activities by asking questions like, what actions do we need to take to create those outputs? Are we going to do some workshops? Are we going to create some training materials? Are we going to do like some whatever type of activities that can maybe give you a certain output? Like make it very specific to the outputs that you have listed in the identification of your outputs. And then finally, you ask questions for your resources or for your input, like what resources do we need to make all these things happen? And how much money maybe you can ask how much money maybe you will need to make all these things happen, or how many people, or what type of people, or what type of like specialists that you need in terms of resources to make things happen or to have certain activities. So as I said earlier, even if you like using the reverse logic, you really need to start by defining your problem statement and then work your way backward in order to have like a real flow in your logic model. What I mean by flow is like everything is connected to each other, like input connected to activities, activities connected to outputs, outputs connected to outcomes. And this is the important part I wanted to talk about, the difference between outputs and outcomes. And I have been working in this field for quite a while now. And even for us, even if we are used to it, sometimes we are really confused about outputs and outcomes. So how I want you to see it is like outputs are the direct results of the activities that you carry out in the project, and they are immediate products or services that are also, we call them deliverables that come from our work. And for example, if we do training sessions, the output would be like the number of people that we train, or maybe the number of training that we conducted, or it might also be like the training materials that we have developed as well as an output. It's all about like the direct product of the activities. And for the outcomes, on the other hand, it's like the effects that happen because of those outputs. They're like the ultimate shifts or improvements that we are aiming for in the targeted community or targeted group as well. It's like increased knowledge, improved skills, or positive behavior change, and so on. And for the next slide, I think, yeah, for the next slide, after you finish to define all the different components of your logic model, when you finish to put it together, first you need to make sure that you have the logical flow. Like everything should go from left to right, with each input linking directly to an activity, then to an output, and finally to an outcome. This way, it all flows in a clear and organized ways. And for the next, you create a logical sequence with your outcomes. So how the short-term outcomes lead to the intermediate outcomes and then eventually to the long-term outcome. So you're building like a clear chain of events. And you'll also want to identify any external factors, things that might happen, either that can either help you to uh, that can either help you to achieve certain things in your project or also can get in the way of your program as well, of your program success actually. Um, but it's really good to be aware of all of that because it can help you shape your program better to kind of mitigate any impact that may come out of like the external factors. And also, as you're developing your logic model, don't forget to write down any assumptions that you have made during planning. And this can also help anyone looking at your model to understand why you think it will work. And also, you also need to review it and refine. And in order for you to do that, you have to bring other people, any stakeholder, like anybody who's going to be part of this project. And sometimes, not sometimes, most of the time, even the community that the community that you're going to work with, you have to bring them in to check for any inconsistencies, like gaps or anything that can actually impact the logic model. And if there are things that you think don't seem to be realistic, you need to address those issues as well and make adjustment based on the feedback of any stakeholders who took part of like the like analysis or the review process of the logic model. So after everything looks good, everything is cleaned up, you make sure that the logic model is really clear and easy to understand and then nicely organized. So like it's ready now, you can start to share it with others as well. So I think this was the last slide for the components of the logic model. Here we have an example of a logic model, and I don't know exactly what specific program this is, but I can assume that this logic model is, I mean, in this project, they are trying to address an issue related to college access, maybe. How I see it is like the project is really focused on improving college readiness and access for low-income high school students. And I can assume that the project aims to provide workshops, not assume, but it's like here. So they are providing workshops, counseling sessions, and also resources to help students to gain knowledge about the college application process and also to help them develop their aspirations for higher education. And ultimately, maybe they are trying to increase their chances of graduating from high school and also to enroll in college. So as I was explaining before, this model outlines it outlines the inputs, like all the resources like funding here, staff, partnership, facilities, and evaluation specialists. And in their activities, they have like training staff, recruiting students, and providing workshops. They are like directly connected to their inputs. And for their outputs, they have number of staff trained, students served, and sessions served, and number of sessions served as well. So these are like directly connected to the activities. And for the outcomes, you can see here, it's like input knowledge and college aspiration among students. And for their long-term impact, it's like increased graduation and college enrollment rates for low-income students. So this example shows how all the parts of the logic model fit together and clearly map out a project's path from resources to long-term impact or long-term change. So basically that's it. So I'm going to end the session here. So what I'm going to do next, you're going to receive an email with a document, with two documents actually. One is a case study that you can read through and try to identify the problem statement. And you can also, based on the problem statement, define a goal for the project. And then you're going to have like the template of the logic model that you're going to identify what type of resources or inputs that you need. And based on those resources, we're going to list your the different activities that you can actually create based on these inputs that you will have or resources, and then define the outputs and the different outcomes. And when you're done with that, you can share your document with me, the template or the logic model that you created. You can share it with me. I can give you feedback and give you feedback. But if you want, you don't have to do it, but it would be really great if you do it because we can actually like work together and make it better. There's no perfect logic model, but yeah, but there's like good logic model as well. So basically that's it. And if you have any question, if something was not really clear during the training here, you can actually send me the question via email as well, and I will be happy to address the questions and I will provide as much information as I can. So thank you, everybody, and I hope to see you on another training.
I have a question, Cassange.
Yes. Yeah.
Could you bring back the logic model example, please?
Okay, sure.
Thank
Just a
you.
second. See it?
Yep. So based on your experience, I can also like maybe like tap into my own experience as well. What have you seen in our community that we fail to do when we're creating a logic model? Because like I would use me as an example for us. I like to start in instead of working from left to right, I would work from right to left. Um, and the reason being is because for me, I like to see what the end goal is and then work backwards to see what I need to do so that I can attain and reach the end goal. But what I've noticed within our community is that most people have a tendency to start from right to left, where they start with impact. And then the minute that they get to inputs, they only focus on the funding and somewhat the program staff, somewhat the partnership, but they forget the evaluation specialist aspect of things in the facilities. And then they get to activities, if whether or not it needs training, the recruitment is like very minimum, as well as like if they're providing any form of like, as you said, like a workshop or counseling, that one is also minimum. And then the outputs aspect of things is somewhat non-existent because everyone is still, you could say, volunteer based, or it's just more like one person does it all. And then when they get to the outcomes is again non-existent. So whereas when we're working with the logic model, what I'm seeing is impact input activities. I'm not seeing outputs and outcomes. What are you seeing on the ground?
Honestly, what I'm seeing on the ground is there's no logic model at all. Most of the
Mm,
time.
mm,
Um, like recently, I worked on a project. I was supposed to do an evaluation of a project last
mm-hmm,
summer. And the first thing I asked for was the logic model. I was like, where's your theory of change? And they're like, we don't have a theory of change. We do have
mm,
like how do they, conceptual framework, conceptual, I can't remember exactly the name they had for it, but something conceptual for the project. But
mm-hmm,
when I read through it, there was no like logical flow
mm-hmm,
in the text that I had, so I couldn't really understand what inputs they had and what type of activities they were doing.
mm-hmm,
I couldn't understand anything at all. So I had to myself do some type of like baseline assessment of the project to understand, okay, how did the project start and who was your targeted population and stuff. So I didn't see anything at all in terms of like theory of change. So I had to build my own theory of change, share
Mm-hmm.
with those stakeholders within the organization and make it make sense to us before I started my evaluation, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one thing because as I presented it here, I said it's like a visual representation of what your project looks like exactly to
Mm-hmm.
make it make sense for you. But in the real world, you don't see that coming. You don't see that at all. They just like put some text together and
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to make your way through that text. It doesn't make sense to you. So this is one thing that I notice most of the time. And but when they actually do have a logic model, their inputs are not clearly defined. You don't know what they have because they are taking money from different like other other projects actually, and they are
Mm-hmm.
using maybe some like evaluators from different other projects that don't really have a background in exactly that the project that you're working on. So nothing is really clear, and even in terms of activity, they don't have like a clear list of the activities that they are doing. They are like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's March 8th for like Women International Women Day. So let's do this. So nothing is clearly defined in the theory of change at all. So that's
Mm.
one thing that I've seen in the development field most of the time. And yeah, based on I've done like two evaluation by myself my whole life for now.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to provide at the end of my evaluation, like in the reports, I had to create a new theory of change for all these projects so they can continue to follow that logic model and work their way on forward.
To have an impact, basically.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
like with activity alone is like we have like different attributes. I think what people or
Yeah,
what
exactly.
some organizations or fell into do is that like they think with the impact, whatever activity that they're
Mhm.
doing will result or will get them to the impact. So they round up doing XYZ instead
Mhm.
of like focusing on, okay, let's say an example would be if the impact is malnutrition nutrition. I understand doing an activity project on a food, a food, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a food project, a food canteen, I guess, project.
Mhm.
But at the same
Feeding
time,
project. Sure.
thank you. So doing a feeding project makes sense. Also working with local farmers makes sense.
Makes sense. Yeah.
But yeah, for me, like doing an activity where you're doing something that is related to like you're doing you could say like a party for the kids, that doesn't align. It doesn't fall in line with the end goal. So that will be a different project of its own. And we will require different assessment, different inputs, different outputs, and just to see like what it is that you're trying to impact. If it is that you're trying to create a sense of belonging in the community, as well as like creating a sense of like you're trying to like your brain awareness that people know that you're around and that you do more than feeding programs for the
Yeah.
community. I think like, within our community, because we organization have a tendency to do multiple projects where they're focusing on everything, most of them don't necessarily are specialists in one issue.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
instead, like they focus on environment, education, healthcare, like they focus on
Mhm.
too much, which unfortunately then burn them out in where they basically round up not doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, exactly. But you mentioned something about having parties for kids that maybe doesn't really fall under an activity. But
Mm-hmm.
it depends also, like, let's say, for example, in terms of activity, you have like community engagement, you know, whatever, gathering, like you have like certain workshop, but I think the
Mm-hmm.
parties sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to actually say we're going to have a party as an activity, but it can fall under the community engagement, like activity that you're doing as well.
Correct.
I've seen that. I've seen that. I've seen
Correct.
that. But there was something interesting that I was gonna say. Yeah, one thing I also noticed is like certain organizations or certain projects, they have an activity that they don't do or the whole year. And
Mm-hmm.
when they're going to have an evaluation, they quickly do something to say that we had an activity, you know?
Mm.
So it's like they have it in their list, in their logic model, but they
Mm-hmm.
never do it. But when it comes to doing evaluation, they do it just to say, hey, we did that, we achieved that, you know? I've seen
Interesting.
that a lot. So what happened there is like, although you check that box, but
Mm-hmm.
what outcomes what's the outcome? You know, what's the outputs?
Yeah.
What the outcomes? During the evaluation, I don't have the time. I will get the chance really to say, hey, they have this activity and this is the outcomes or this is the outputs of it, you know? I can't
Mm-hmm.
really document that. So that happens a whole lot, whole lot. Most of
Now,
the time, organizations do activities at the very end when they're going to have an evaluation.
Now, a question for you is if that is the case, let's say, because for me, what makes sense for transparency purposes, if you are not able to do an activity, it's always good to be transparent to state why it was that you didn't do the activity, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it should be, but that's not the way it works, to be honest.
Okay. So what is I won't say the roundabout, but what is ethically speaking, you could say the ethically speaking, what it should be is that if you didn't do the activity, just be transparent and say why you didn't do it. Maybe there was some constraint, maybe there was a lack of personnel that were equipped to do the activity. I would say like, what is the loophole as to I guess for me, I'm seeing it, the reason why they do that is because they want the full funding. Um, but it's always good to be transparent. That way you create
It's always
trust.
good to be
But like what
transparent. Like from my experience in Haiti, sometimes we use the political situation and say that it impacts us, and that's why
Mhm.
the activity was conducted very late. But when it's like an internal evaluation, sometimes I am really pressured to put that in the internal report because the team will eat things
Mm,
when I talk about it. That happened a lot. So
mm.
it's like I don't know how to explain that, and I don't know if I can explain that here, but
No,
yeah,
it's understandable.
yeah,
It's
it's
understandable. I have my experience as well.
yeah. Lately, yeah, that happens to me. Like there are some things going on within certain activities that they were doing,
Hmm.
and I had that information. I clearly had the data. Like if you go to my data, you'll see it clearly like someone was saying it, and I had the transcription that someone was saying it. And then I
Hmm.
mentioned it in my report. Everybody was like, no, you shouldn't mention that. But it's happening. If I don't mention it, how are you going to address that issue? It's like you're
Exactly.
paying someone, it's like a bribery, but it comes so much in my data. So I had to mention it to the team. But
Hmm.
thank God it was like an internal evaluation. So they did address the issue internally. But
Hmm.
for the report that we're going to send to donors, we cannot really mention that because you're gonna lose everything if they know
Exactly.
about it. So it's like a fragile domain or field.
Hmm.
But yeah, there are things that can only happen that can, I don't know, it's really
With
uncomfortable sometimes.
with that being said, I guess question for you is now, does this should donors be privy to the situation in specifically like countries like Haiti that is well that experience constant destabilization or whatnot, should donors have this context where when it comes to evaluation, when it comes to reporting, that they understand certain activities will not, in not, I won't say will not, but has the possibility of not happening because of things that are outside of their control. Should that be something that donors should be privy to and maybe create a little acceptance there?
Yeah, that happens. Like donors, they are usually aware that certain activities might be impacted by what's happening in the local
Yeah.
communities.
Mm-hmm.
Like from my experience as well, one thing I've noticed is like sometimes donors send people that do like security assessment in the
Mm-hmm.
community and see if things can happen. So based on that security, on that person who came to do the security assessment, based on their reports, they might say, hey, we understand that the situation is going on in the community and it might impact certain activities. So we're
Mm-hmm.
going to seek out the funding for it. So we're going to work on a mitigation plan to make it
Mm-hmm.
happen. And here's how it's going to happen next time. You
Yeah.
know, it's not
Yeah.
like they are avoiding the activities, they're not doing it at all, but they do it to like have like a mitigation plan. Most of the
Mm-hmm.
time, that's what they do. Yeah.
Agreed.
But there are
Agreed.
situations, I mean, those situations you really need to report them to donors. There are situations that are really like so critical that you can't share. You try to address it yourself before you talk to
Mm-hmm.
donors about it. But certain situations like for a political reason, you cannot really do certain activities.
Exactly.
You have to report to the donor. Like I was working for the Investor Foundation in Haiti, and one of the advocacy work is the rights of LGBTQ community.
Mm-hmm.
So they want you in Haiti to do gay pride in Haiti,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same
The
time, the
context of
government,
Haiti.
yeah, the context of Haiti, you cannot do gay pride activity. So the
Exactly.
way they ask us to do it, it's like at Caribbean Hotel, nobody needs to know about it. We
Yeah.
just have an activity for the gay people. So it's not like an open activity for like everybody to come. It's like an invitation.
Mm-hmm.
You receive an invitation to come to this party.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way they still do the work. And you can, in your report, you can say, hey, we had like the gay pride in Haiti this year. So it happened, but it doesn't happen the way it should have happened because there are certain factors out of
At
our
play
control.
that exactly that
Yeah.
is constraint and unfortunately the reality. I guess that's something that I'm seeing with a lot of donors is that they don't
Mhm.
fully understand the reality of Haiti is that what may
Exactly.
work in the United States, what may work in France, what may work in other parts of the world may not work in Haiti
In Haiti. Yeah,
because
exactly.
there's a lot of
That's
context that goes
yeah,
into it. There's a lot of like culture nuances that the world is
yeah.
not privy to, even though for us, like in the States, like we're open to it, we're more open, we're more inclusive. In Haiti,
Mhm.
it may not be welcome as that.
Yeah, yeah. And there are other factors as well that maybe we can control those factors,
Hmm.
but sometimes they can impact negatively the project. It's out of your control, but also you can really control it. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I
You
understand.
can really manage to control it. So these are things that happen in the field as well. Yeah, but in terms of like maybe ethics, maybe I don't know how they would actually consider it if it's unethical to say to do something like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's really confusing and challenging.
It's
It's really